watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is the programme where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts, and joining me today are Alex Eady via Zoom from Dubai, head of short stays for luxuryproperty.com Dubai. Welcome Alex, good to see you here again. And Terry Everson, director of Cornerstone FX Services. Welcome Terry.
Good to be back.
Good, nice to see you. Good trip in, I hope.
Central Line is never a good trip, but as good as it can be.
Well, we all have to suffer, so don't worry. Okay, Alex, I'm going to start off with you with your question. I've been looking at purchasing an apartment or possibly two in Dubai. Could the panel advise me as to the better areas when comparing yields of perhaps cityscape properties as opposed to oceanfront properties?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have said there was a better area. It depends what you're looking to invest in. So just to elaborate on that side of things a little bit, Dubai is made up of multiple communities. Inland are a bit more landlocked, but they're villa communities and typically sort of families, I suppose. And then towards the marina and on the Palm, it's a mixture, but mainly apartments, which you're going to get a sort of more transient sort of tenants in, I suppose. The villa communities are mainly targeted for long-term tenants. So if you wanted to invest in something where you could literally know or sort of have security, where you're going to get tenants that are going to be in there for a long time, it's almost like you can sit there and forget about it, then I would suggest probably one of the villa communities. Sort of Arabian ranches or Emirates living. Otherwise, you're better off sort of potentially investing in something in the marina or blue waters or on the Palm. They're more commonly sort of rented out on a shorter term basis where the premiums are a lot higher.
That would typically be a holiday let?
Sometimes a holiday let, sometimes even sort of 3 to 6 months. So not necessarily a year, but again, sort of people that want to be here for 6 months and then move on somewhere else or move into a villa because they've outgrown it.
Okay. Did I hear you use the word ranch then?
Ranches, Arabian ranches is a community here.
Explain that expression if you would.
It's just the name of one of the communities over here. So it's rapidly growing and it's really, really popular. They're launching the third Arabian Ranches community here. They're primarily just villas, sort of larger than sort of 3-bed plus, really, right the way up to 7 bedrooms. Right. Community pools, community centres, shopping centres in all of them. But super popular with families. There's good schools around there as well. It's about a 15-minute drive into downtown and the marina, so it's pretty central. So those sort of communities, like Arabian Ranches, are now just growing and growing. And yeah, we're on to the third one, and they're just sort of absolutely selling like wildfire off plan.
And do they have a little bit of land with them, or?
Yeah, so they're all entry level. Would be a 3-bedroom villa. Some people add their own private pool, but there is community pools, but all of them are either semi-detached or detached with their own garden, off-road parking, garage.
Okay, and the other two areas that you mentioned were the marina. I presume that's where these pretty spectacular hotels and high-rise are, yeah?
Yes, that's probably the most iconic part of Dubai, yeah.
That's the picture we all see, yeah?
That's the one, yeah. So that's sort of polar opposite. So those are all apartment blocks ranging from studios, 1-beds and 2-beds up to sort of 3 or 4 bedroom split level penthouses. Yeah. There are some villas at the bottom of the apartment blocks as well, sort of 3 or 4 normally. So that's not overly sort of that prominent in the marina, and it's very much lateral living.
Okay. And the final area that you mentioned was the Palm, I think.
Yes.
What would we find there typically?
A complete mixture of both. So if you're looking, obviously it looks like a palm tree. If you're looking at the main palm, the main trunk of it is all apartment blocks on each side and down the center of it. And then the crescent, again, on the outer side of it is all apartments, but then the fronds, which look like the palm leaves, are all villa communities. So all with their own private pool, private beach. And obviously the further out on the front that you go, so the higher number villa is the more sought after.
Okay. And all right, I'm going to have to ask you, your favourite area?
I live in the marina, so I'm going to be biased and say the marina. It literally feels like I'm on holiday every time I go home.
Okay, sounds lovely. I think we're all extremely jealous here. All extremely jealous. Okay, Terry. Well, back to London and sending people's money all over the world. So, if I use an FX company to transfer money abroad for a property purchase, would my money be protected if that company went out of business at any point prior to the transaction being completed?
Yes, it is protected. The client would be asked to send their funds into a designated client bank account, and funds have to be safeguarded. So they're kept totally separate from the client's own funds. And the regulated FX broker has to have regular safeguarding audits to monitor that all the funds are kept in the right place.
Okay. Now, I don't think for a moment our questioner is trying to be clever with the wording here, but I'm just looking at the final sentence there, and it says if the FX company went out of business at any point prior to the transaction being completed. I think that's a bit too broad a statement for you, isn't it, really? Because your liability would finish a bit before the completion of the transaction, in other words, the purchase.
Well, if you go through the process of the transaction, so the client would come on, he'd do the foreign exchange transaction to fix the rate in.
Yeah.
He would then send the funds in, let's say for this example it's £1 million. That goes into the designated client safeguarded account, so it's ring fenced.
Mm-hmm.
So if in a worst case scenario the FX broker went into administration before the funds were sent, those funds are still in the safeguarding account and the client would still get those funds passed on to them.
Right. I think what I'm getting at there, Terry, is that, right, you get to that point, you've not gone into liquidation or receivership, you've sent the funds, let's say, across to, Paris Bank or whoever, it hits Paris Bank, do they then take responsibility for that money?
Once those funds...
And yours are finished?
Yeah, correct.
Right, okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Because it's just that wording where it says prior to the transaction being completed. I think you have to be very clear about what transaction, which transaction, I think. Okay, well, that sounds pretty safe. Are there any little danger areas there that you've got to watch for?
No, I mean, the key thing as well is the onward payment is from the client's instructions. They set up where the funds go to. It's their decision. The key thing from a client's perspective and from our perspective is to identify source of funds. So in every transaction, the client has to confirm, where the funds originated in the first place.
Right.
And we have to be comfortable with that before we proceed.
Right. And what happens if you're not comfortable?
Compliance will reject the account opening and we won't go through with the transaction.
Okay. And what sort of comfort would you look for?
It would typically be sort of bank statements, or if the client source of funds was a sale of property in the UK, you would ask for a copy of the sale agreement so you could see, it's genuine. Some clients, it's inheritance money, so you'd need to see like proof where the money come from. It's not acceptable if someone says, "Oh, it's my income that I've earned over the years." You'd have to look a bit deeper than that because that's the easy answer. Correct.
Yes. Or I've just come out of William Hill's. Or
well, I think the biggest problem we ever had was with a Swiss client.
Right.
Typically Swiss, he didn't want to declare source of funds. And we said, well, then we can't proceed with the transaction.
Right. Okay. I mean, I presume you get hung, drawn, and quartered if you don't go through this compliance process.
Well, our money laundering officer will get hung, drawn and caught. Fortunately, not myself. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's probably not the most pleasant of jobs, is it? But okay. Oh well, that all sounds very good. Terry, if you were having a client in front of you, as you used as an example, he'd got £1 million he wanted to send abroad for a property purchase. If you weren't exactly comfortable with where he was sending it to, and let me just expand on that. I mean, I think, you know, we from time to time do various programs on French property and Italian property, that sort of thing. And one of the key messages that always comes out is that whatever you do, don't transfer any money to the person you're purchasing from. Either send it to a bank, send it to a lawyer, send it to a notary, but never the
Correct.
The purchaser. Would you advise? Would you comment?
Yep. Virtually every one of the transactions we've covered normally go to a solicitor or the client's bank account overseas. Also, our compliance department do due diligence on the receiving entity as well.
Okay.
To cover that part off.
Good. All sounds very safe. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you both very much. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show. Join me again after the break.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and I'm joined by Terry Everson and Alex Eady. So, Alex, your last question of the programme. If I were to invest in property for rental in Dubai, what sort of rates of return on capital could I expect? My preference would be to get lets of 12 months or less in case I ever decided to use the property for my own use. I get what he's driving at there is what sort of properties perhaps have the best returns, and given that he's looking for less than 12 months lets, I mean, that's right up your street, isn't it? That's
Yeah, absolutely.
The shorter stays. So let's hear what you've got to say.
I mean, in terms of properties here at the moment, the properties that are getting the highest sort of ROI are high-end beachfront palm villas. They're sitting on average at about 15% at the moment on short-term accommodation. Entry level to buy is for a garden home is about 15 million dirhams, but we're actually achieving 1.5 million dirhams.
How much is that in real money for us over here?
Halve it and no, hang on, double it and take off the last zero.
I think our FX director there said it was about 3 million.
I think we're just under, 5 dirhams to the pound.
It is, yeah. So I normally double it and take off the last zero.
He was right then. Spot on, Terry. Well done. These are the beachfronts on the Palm, yeah?
So the beachfront villas are the ones that are seeing, so they're basically the super prime properties at the moment. That's what we're seeing the most uptake on. It's generally a pretty steady demand for them all year round. Obviously, the summer here is very hot, so that does see a lot of people leave. However, it's the higher end stuff that seems to be rented out over the summer months on a more permanent basis. Opposite end of the spectrum, I guess, would be sort of your standard 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartments in either downtown or Business Bay, sort of the main financial hub of Dubai, or the marina about 15 minutes away as well. The return on those, it's very seasonal. So in the winter months for us, so October to March, optimum rents are achieved. But in the summer months, there is normally a bit of a larger sort of oversaturation of stock, for example, which either brings the prices down or increases voids.
Okay. And I suppose with shorter term lets, it's very much easier to up and down the rents, isn't it? You know,
it is, yeah. There's no regulations and there's no restrictions on that whatsoever in Dubai either. So when Expo hit, what we did see was a lot of people in short-term accommodation, just because it's easier, because it's all inclusive, had their rent doubled or tripled with 24 hours notice, because you can, and the demand was there and the landlords knew that and they've achieved it. So we're now approaching the period where Expo is finishing and coming into the summer, and it's going to be a hard pill to swallow, where the rents are going to have to probably, on the monthly side of things, reduce drastically.
But I mean, I think with any kind of property, I mean, it's very foolish to look at the short-term prospects. You know, property's never been a 5-minute business, has it? You know.
No, it hasn't. I think over here it's very quick paced anyway, and I think they've just made landlords, I mean, quite rightly, have just made the most of what they could get in a short space of time.
Well, you know, landlords with voids and defaulting on their mortgages and payments is no good for any market, is it? So
no, exactly.
Yeah.
No, very true.
Far better to have the adjustments and just take the bitter pill and live for another day, really, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
So with all the global warming going on, what sort of temperatures are you seeing in the summer now?
Last summer was very, very, very long. It's over 45 every day from June, July and August. And then September normally cools down, but for some reason the humidity levels went to nearly 100%. So it made it feel over 50 every day.
Really? Well, just to cheer you up, I think it's 9 here this morning. Okay. If you really want to upset us.
No, not at all. It is completely different over here. They seed the clouds as well, so it rained for 3 days over New Year's just to get a bit of water onto the country. So it's completely different to the UK.
Well, seeding clouds is not an activity we have to enter into here, fortunately. But, but there we are. Okay, Alex, thank you very much for that. Terry, your last question. When considering a property purchase abroad, are there any limits in terms of money I can transfer from the UK? I guess I should also ask if there are any limits that the receiving country might also impose. My question relates, I think, in the main to European countries, but I think I've got something I want to ask you after that, but let's hear your answer.
No limits. So most of the transactions we process are Europe, US or UAE. But there's no limit from the receiving country or the outgoing payments. And I'd say on average, most of the transactions we undertake are between $250,000 and $2 million, between that range. You do sometimes get the odd 10 or 20 million transaction, but it's normally a lot lower than that, but there are no limits. I'd like to get the day when we have a client who wants to buy something for 100 million. I'd like to experience that, but we haven't seen that yet.
Well, you'd have the rest of the week off,
yeah.
wouldn't you? It's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing. I mean, probably you don't remember, but I can remember the days of exchange controls when I think we were allowed to take 25 quid out of the country.
Exactly.
I think so. There's no restrictions of any kind.
No restrictions.
But when you say that, I mean, I know the regulations say for Heathrow, for instance, if you go through Heathrow with, in theory, there is no limit on you taking money out of the country. However, if you are caught with more than £1,000 in any form of cash or tradable currency, then they're likely to take it from you and wait for you to prove where it come from until you get it back. So there is a sort of inherent restriction there, but nothing with the FX business.
Nothing with the FX, and as I've said before, we have to verify
where it's
come from in the first place before we go through with a transaction.
Yeah, and I know you described to us some of the processes that you have to go through. Is that literally a sort of tick box exercise?
It is. There's sort of strict rules from the compliance department, what they go through with the KYC on every transaction.
Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to visualise somebody sitting in front of you in the office there. You're going through the tick list. You hit a couple of points and you're thinking, I need to question this guy a little bit more on this. And they sort of say, no, I'm sorry, that's private business. You know.
We won't take, we regard in our business, clients are sort of classified as high risk, medium or low.
Right.
And individuals are always classified as high risk.
Right.
Because you haven't got the information that you could get on a company transaction.
Of course, yeah.
And we have to do what's known as EDD, which is enhanced due diligence. So we have to do that on every private client transaction.
And how would that show itself? Let's say if I came into you as an individual, or I came in as a limited company, what would be the...
Well, a limited company, a lot of the information you're looking is in the public domain that you can get from Companies House, from their audited accounts, you know, the business they're in. You can get huge amounts of information. You do KYC on the directors that is in the public domain. An individual is more private, you know, and this is where the source of funds is key.
Yeah.
You know, that's the most important thing. But you have to verify their proof of address, an ID check. But the key thing is source of funds.
It's interesting, even the proof of address some days is quite difficult nowadays. A lot of people do paperless billing, don't they? So you don't you don't have your electricity bill to take in anymore.
Well, it is onerous, and in fact one of the main domiciles we have that problem is Dubai, because I don't think in Dubai people get utility bills. So sometimes when we've got a Dubai client, we have to go a different route there.
Right. Okay. And you know, I just in terms of percentages, do you get many people that actually fail the know your client?
No, I think less than 5%.
Right.
Less than 5%.
Okay. I suppose actually because they're buying property abroad as well, they're putting the money into a sort of traceable and registerable
Correct.
transaction, aren't they,
Yeah.
or an asset. I suppose gone are the days of going back years. You know, you'd sort of buy a property in Spain in a Gibraltar company, and they'd be bearer shares. You wouldn't like that one too
Those
much.
days are gone, long gone.
Okay. All right. Well, on those long gone days, I'm going to say thank you both very much indeed for your contribution to today's programme. Alex Eady from luxuryproperties.com, thank you so much
Thank you for
your
having me.
input.
Pleasure.
Really good. Thank you. Terry Everson, thank you very much for your very technical information and keeping us all on the straight and narrow. So there we are. That's all we have time for today. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.